Welcome. You've joined us for a deep dive into some really interesting material you shared with us. It's all about understanding what really triggers you
Yeah.
and, the power behind your emotions.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to explore this idea that maybe those frustrating things we do, those self-sabotaging behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they aren't just problems we need to get rid of.
Mm.
Maybe they're actually like important signals. So our mission here is to really dig into how we can interpret these so-called negative emotions.
Right, and use them.
And use that understanding to actually make positive changes in your life.
That's a fantastic way to put it. It's so common, isn't it? We all want to push away or just ignore feelings that make us uncomfortable.
Totally.
But as this material really shows, emotions like anger, sadness, guilt, embarrassment, they all carry valuable information. They're sort of like an internal compass.
A compass.
Yeah, trying to guide us towards something we haven't quite recognized yet.
Okay, so let's jump right into that. The messages inside these negative emotions. The material you sent really highlights that if we keep trying to suppress these feelings,
Yeah, just push them down.
right, instead of figuring out what they're telling us, that's when we can start seeing more persistent issues popping up
Exactly.
and even find ourselves getting triggered more easily over time. He also made this point that really stuck with me. The thing that sets us off, the external trigger,
Yeah.
it isn't usually the core problem itself.
No, that's key. It's more about our own, emotional processing skills.
Right.
Think of it like if you keep stubbing your toe on the same coffee table in the dark.
Oh, yeah.
The problem isn't just the table, it's also about not having the light on or maybe not knowing the room layout well enough.
Okay, I get that analogy.
So similarly, our triggers often just highlight areas where we maybe haven't quite developed the skills to navigate our inner world effectively. But here's where it gets really interesting.
No.
When we do start to understand why something triggers us, those exact experiences can become these incredibly powerful catalysts for release and, positive growth.
So let's zoom in on some specifics then. The material takes a good look at interpreting several key negative emotions.
Yeah.
Starting with anger. Now, anger, it has a pretty bad rap for a lot of us.
Oh, absolutely.
We're often taught it's bad, something to avoid completely. But this perspective seems to kind of flip that idea.
It really does. What's fascinating is the distinction it draws between anger and aggression. The source material actually calls anger a beautiful, transformative emotion.
Wow, okay. That sounds surprising.
Yeah, it might. But it explains that healthy anger actually serves some really crucial functions. First off, it helps us identify our boundaries.
Ah, boundary.
That internal no, that feeling that signals when something just doesn't feel right to us. It also plays a really vital role in helping us recognize injustices, things in the world we feel are unfair.
Right, unfairness.
So basically, anger isn't aggression. It's more like your internal alarm system saying stop or this isn't right. Understanding what triggers it helps you see your limits and what needs to change.
And the big takeaway with anger seems to be that it's really about internal mobilization. Is that the right word?
That's a great way to put it.
It's not about directing that energy outward as aggression towards someone else,
No, ideally not.
but about harnessing that really powerful energy to fuel change within ourselves and our own lives.
Yeah.
Misinterpreting that as maybe when it spills over.
Precisely. The inherent energy of anger is really designed to initiate action. It's that surge of motivation that can finally push us to deal with something we've been avoiding, or maybe change a situation that isn't working for us anymore. So instead of instinctively just fearing anger, the suggestion here is to start using it as a valuable tool.
Okay.
Use it to understand your own limits better, get clearer on your priorities, and really drive meaningful, necessary changes.
Okay, next up, sadness. This one feels a bit more straightforward, maybe. It's presented as a normal, even necessary response to loss.
Yes, it is.
But there seem to be some important nuances here, especially in how we, allow ourselves to actually feel it.
Absolutely. The material really emphasizes that sadness can come from so many kinds of loss, losing a relationship, a job, even just the disappointment when an expectation doesn't pan out.
Right.
What becomes tricky is when we actively resist or try to suppress the natural phases of grief that come with sadness. It's not something that just disappears if we ignore it.
No, definitely not.
It often comes in waves, right?
Yeah.
And trying to just hold it back can actually make it last longer.
And I think the point about not feeling embarrassed or, weak for needing to cry or just feel down is really powerful.
It is.
It even reframes crying at the right times, of course, as a sign of mental strength. That completely flips the usual script.
Exactly. Allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, to fully experience those waves of sadness, is actually a crucial part of processing it healthily and completely. Constantly resisting it can actually trap us in that feeling.
Keep you stuck.
Yeah, and prevent us from eventually moving forward in a positive way.
Now let's talk about guilt. This one's interesting because the material suggests we often feel more guilt for things we didn't do rather than things we actually did.
Isn't that fascinating? And the observation that the people who feel guilt most often are frequently not the ones who've done truly terrible things.
Ah, yeah.
The very fact that you're feeling remorse for potentially wronging someone, that's presented as a positive sign of your inner moral compass.
Right.
But it does act as a prompt. We need to examine our behavior honestly. If we have acted unfairly or caused harm, the material stress is acknowledging that, apologizing sincerely, and, making amends.
So guilt over inaction. It tells you something about your values, what you're avoiding.
Exactly. What are you avoiding that your guilt is kind of nudging you towards? But it also touches on this idea of a generalized guilt.
Generalized guilt, like not tied to anything specific.
Right. Not tied to a specific action. It suggests this can often stem from childhood experiences, maybe feeling like a burden growing up.
Oh, interesting.
That's a really insightful point. These deep-seated feelings of guilt, even without a clear origin now, can get projected onto current situations, even when they're not really warranted.
So understanding the roots.
Understanding the potential roots, tracing it back, can be a crucial step in learning how to release it as an adult.
Moving on to embarrassment, that uncomfortable feeling when we know we haven't behaved in a way we're proud of.
Yeah, we've all been there.
The source makes a pretty strong statement here.
Mhm.
It says other people can never truly make us feel as embarrassed as we ultimately make ourselves feel.
This really puts the spotlight on the internal nature of embarrassment, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests that when we have a solid foundation of self-acceptance and, a genuine sense of pride in who we are, the judgments of others tend to lose a lot of their power.
Mm.
The material also draws a really important line between embarrassment and its shadow side, which it calls shame.
Shame. Okay, how's that different?
Shame is described as much deeper, more pervasive. It's a feeling of self-condemnation, like feeling inherently unworthy.
Right, much heavier.
Exactly. And the warning that unprocessed embarrassment can actually morph into something darker over time. That's quite sobering.
Yeah, it underscores the importance of actually acknowledging and processing those moments of discomfort instead of just sweeping them under the rug.
Absolutely. When we consistently avoid facing those milder feelings of embarrassment, they can unfortunately build up and contribute to a more entrenched sense of shame and inadequacy long term.
Okay, let's dive into jealousy. Another one that's often seen as purely negative, right?
Mhm.
But the material reframes it as a cover-up emotion.
Yeah, this is insightful. The idea is that jealousy often acts as a mask for underlying feelings, usually sadness or a general sense of self-dissatisfaction.
So it's hiding something else.
Exactly. And the practical takeaway offered is really powerful. The material suggests that if you want to get clearer on what you truly desire in your own life, pay attention to who makes you feel jealous.
Okay. But not necessarily wanting their exact life.
Not necessarily their exact things, no, but the feeling itself is a strong signal that maybe they are allowing themselves to pursue something that you might be suppressing or denying in yourself.
Okay.
So when we feel that pang of jealousy, it's actually like this powerful trigger pointing us towards something we value, but maybe aren't letting ourselves have or pursue.
But there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to use that information, isn't there?
Oh, for sure.
Judging other people's accomplishments, feeling resentful, that's presented as the negative side.
That's the destructive path.
Whereas using it as a tool to identify our own genuine desires, our motivations, that's seen as much more constructive. It even touches on how we sometimes criticize in others the very things we're suppressing in ourselves.
Exactly. That kind of judgmental jealousy often serves as a way to unconsciously justify our own inaction.
I think so.
By focusing on and condemning what others have, we avoid confronting our own unfulfilled longings. The healthier approach is to use those feelings like a compass.
A compass again?
Yeah, one that can help point us towards what we genuinely want to create and experience in our own lives.
Resentment is another tough one many of us deal with. The material explains it often comes from unmet expectations we have of other people.
Yes, and it goes on to describe resentment as a kind of projected regret.
Projected regret.
Yeah, where we focus on what we see as other people's shortcomings or how we think they should be acting. But the crucial point is,
They don't have to meet our expectations.
Exactly. Other people are under no inherent obligation to live up to the specific expectations we might hold for them. Our frustration and resentment often stem from holding on to this rigid idea of who someone was supposed to be or how they were supposed to treat us.
So the practical takeaway here seems to be about consciously trying to reinvent our internal image of the people we resent.
That's the core of it.
Instead of dwelling on how they fell short, try to actively see them for who they actually are, what role they really play in our lives.
Right. In reality.
And maybe most importantly, what we can learn from the situation as it is, rather than being stuck in disappointment about how we thought it should be.
That deliberate shift in perspective is absolutely key. By letting go of those rigid expectations, we create space to engage with people more authentically as they are. And we can focus on our own growth and understanding rather than staying trapped in that cycle of disappointment.
Regret gets a similar kind of reframing in the material, much like jealousy. It's not just about dwelling on the past, but it can actually be a powerful motivator for the future.
Yes, the material makes a really strong point that when people look back, they most often regret the things they didn't do.
Oh, interesting. More than what they did do.
More than what they actually did, yeah. Regret, seen this way, isn't just meant to make us feel bad about the past. It's actually trying to nudge us, maybe even push us, to live more fully and align with our own values moving forward.
So it highlights what's really important to us.
Exactly. It's highlighting those things that are truly important for us to experience or achieve before it feels like it might be too late.
And the examples given really help, like regretting not taking a trip or not prioritizing self-care or not telling people you love them.
Yes, those kinds of regrets become really clear signals about what we need to actively prioritize in our lives now, in the present.
So regret can be a catalyst.
An incredibly powerful catalyst for positive change, yeah. Prompting us to finally take those actions we've been putting off and ultimately live a life that feels more authentically aligned with our deepest values and desires.
Okay, finally, let's talk about chronic fear. The material explains that when we have these persistent fearful thoughts, it's not always about present danger.
Right, it's often not about what's happening right now. It can stem from past experiences that haven't been fully processed or from coping mechanisms we developed earlier.
And it mentions fear often operates through a kind of internal metaphor, like loss of control.
Yes, that's a common one.
Yeah.
And the act of worrying, which so many people do when they feel fearful.
Yeah, trying to control things by thinking about them.
Exactly. It's presented as a somewhat misguided attempt to maintain control by fixating on potential negative outcomes. But the paradox is, by constantly holding on to these fearful thoughts, these anxieties, that's often precisely how fear gains control over us.
Oh, okay.
It diverts our energy and focus away from the things we can actually influence and change.
So the core message for overcoming chronic fear seems to be about actually moving through it, learning to accept what's genuinely beyond our control.
That's it. The act of consciously shrugging off those pervasive fears, starting to recognize that our own negative thinking is often the biggest hurdle, that's presented as incredibly liberating.
Empowering. Yeah.
Absolutely. Acceptance here doesn't mean liking the things we fear.
Right.
It means we actively stop giving those fears so much power over our thoughts and actions. When we stop that internal struggle, that constant resistance,
Fear loses its grip.
it can begin to lose its grip, yes.
Yeah.
And over time, it can even become more of a non-issue in our daily lives.
This whole discussion around these so-called negative emotions really leads into the broader idea of our own internal guidance systems.
It does.
The material suggests that the things that persistently bother us are actually important signals from our own minds about areas that need attention or fixing.
Exactly. Those recurring irritations, frustrations, anxieties, they're not random. They're more like internal nudges, our inner selves trying to get our attention. The material actually warns that consistently ignoring these signals just makes them louder, more insistent.
Right.
And in some cases, it can even lead to dissociation, that feeling of being disconnected from yourself or your feelings as a way to cope.
Wow.
But the core message is that we already possess many of the answers and the potential within ourselves to address these issues.
And this perspective really reframes self-sabotage then.
Completely.
Instead of just seeing these behaviors as bad things to eliminate, they're presented as ways we're currently trying to meet underlying needs.
Right, albeit in ways that aren't ultimately healthy or effective.
So the real challenge becomes identifying those unmet needs and finding better, more constructive ways to fulfill them.
That's a crucial shift. Instead of self-condemnation when we see these patterns, it encourages curiosity. What is this behavior really trying to achieve for me?
Right.
It also thoughtfully addresses that societal pressure for constant self-sufficiency
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
and validates the fundamental human needs for connection, validation, and basic security.
It's interesting how it points out that neglecting these fundamental needs often starts with a belief that having them is a weakness.
Yeah, maybe rooted in childhood when we were reliant on others.
Right. But it emphasizes that while self-sufficiency is important as we mature, we can't realistically meet all our needs alone,
No, of course not.
and that the human need for connection, belonging, contributing,
Yeah.
that's actually very healthy and natural. It even validates needing things like financial security or a nice place to live without calling it greed.
Yes, it's about finding that healthy balance, cultivating self-reliance, and recognizing our inherent need for connection and support, acknowledging our needs without shame.
This leads us into the really fascinating idea that our subconscious mind is constantly trying to communicate through these self-sabotaging behaviors.
Yes, using our patterns.
The material actually lists examples connecting specific behaviors to potential underlying messages. Let's touch on a few, like repeatedly going back to harmful relationships.
Right, that might signal a need to really look at the relationship patterns we learned in childhood. It's insightful how these seemingly negative patterns can hold clues to past experiences and unmet needs. For example, always attracting unavailable partners.
Yeah.
That might suggest a deeper issue around self-worth, like maybe not believing we deserve commitment
Oh.
or feeling unhappy despite external success. That could mean relying too much on external validation instead of cultivating inner peace.
And patterns like pushing people away.
Yeah.
Maybe that's fear of vulnerability.
Could be. Or maybe feeling inauthentic, like there's a gap between who we really are and who we show the world, so we fear being truly seen.
Okay.
The tendency to just automatically believe every thought and feeling. That could be a sign we're stuck in the comfort of worry instead of seeking clarity and discernment.
Wow. Okay. What else? Well, unhealthy eating habits could link to overextending ourselves, not getting enough rest or nourishment, or maybe trying to soothe emotional needs.
Right, emotional eating.
Avoiding work that could advance your career might mean a lack of clarity in goals, or maybe a deeper need to pause and regroup.
Makes sense. Overworking could be about proving value, or maybe just escaping uncomfortable feelings. Caring too much about others' opinions often points to a lack of inner happiness, relying on external validation.
The list really goes on: overspending, maybe masks a need for security. Dwelling on exes could mean unprocessed hurt, needing closure.
Exactly. Competitive friendships might be trying to get value through superiority instead of seeking real connection.
Self-defeating thoughts as a defense mechanism against judgment, but it becomes self-bullying.
Yeah, or not promoting your work because of fear of judgment rooted in self-criticism. Ascribing bad intent to others could be self-centered thinking.
Staying somewhere you dislike might be internal resistance versus fear of judgment, or feeling like you're not making progress.
And even mindless social media scrolling can be about numbing discomfort or avoiding a need for change.
Wow. So the core argument is that each of these behaviors, if we look closely, holds a kernel of truth about what we really need or what needs addressing from our past.
Exactly. It's about learning to decode these messages our behaviors are sending.
And this brings us to the really crucial point of learning to listen to ourselves again. Developing that ability to process and interpret our feelings in real time.
Yes, as they happen.
The idea being, if we don't learn to understand and meet our needs now, we'll just keep trying to fix our choices later.
Stuck in that cycle. This is where building emotional intelligence comes in, which the material says will be explored more later. But it starts with listening to our instincts.
Right. Follow your gut. We hear that a lot.
And there's a solid basis for it. Research increasingly supports the strong brain-body connection, especially the gut, the second brain.
The second brain, yeah.
It's constantly storing and processing subconscious info, which is why those gut feelings can be surprisingly accurate. The vagus nerve is key here, that communication highway.
But the material also makes a really important clarification. Genuine gut instinct operates in the present moment only.
That's crucial.
Feelings or instincts about the future, those are projections based on past experiences and current beliefs, not real intuition about what's coming.
Exactly. So to help tell the difference, the material gives some good questions to ask ourselves in the moment. Like,
Right.
am I truly responding to the person right here, now, or am I reacting to my ideas about them? Am I responding to this situation as it is, or to a future scenario I'm imagining?
Yes.
It also emphasizes the subtle nature of real gut instinct. It's usually quiet, calm, not the loud panic that often comes with fear. It's more like a wave of inner clarity.
And it distinguishes instincts as responses to the present from feelings, which often reflect our thoughts and interpretations, which aren't always accurate.
Precisely. And following your instinct isn't always about seeking comfort. It guides you toward that intersection of your interests, skills, and desires, which might mean facing challenges sometimes.
This leads to a really key point. Instinct and fear can feel surprisingly similar,
It really can.
which is why just blindly trusting every gut feeling as if it predicts the future can actually be problematic, lead us astray.
The material strongly emphasizes that feelings don't dictate the right decisions. It's making decisions aligned with our values and well-being that creates the right feelings over time.
So use your head too, not just impulse.
Right. Our rational minds should guide the bigger long-term choices. It talks about consciously conditioning ourselves with daily actions, things that promote clarity, calm, health, purpose as the path to peace and joy.
And learning to organize feelings by tracing them back to the thoughts that triggered them.
Yes. That lets us assess, is this based on a real present threat? Or is it my reptilian mind, that primal survival part fabricating worst-case scenarios?
Okay.
It reassures us that impulses are natural, we're animals in a modern world, but we do have the power to choose how we respond, what actions we take.
Okay, so understanding that gut-brain connection helps explain why we say, listen to your instincts.
Yes. The serotonin, the vagus nerve, it's physiological.
But remembering it's about the present. Like you get a gut feeling about someone after interacting, or know if a job feels right after starting it.
Exactly. The trouble starts when we try to use instincts for fortune-telling, trying to avoid all pain, maximize pleasure. That gets us stuck, trusting every feeling instead of discerning reactions from projections.
So the key to telling the difference between instinct and fear is staying present.
Absolutely. Asking what is true right now as we engage with people, activities, our own behaviors, then comparing that immediate sense of truth to our thoughts, feelings, future projections.
And true gut instinct is usually subtle, gentle, not panicky, even if the news isn't great.
Generally, yes. It doesn't usually induce panic, even with unwelcome information.
Which brings us to distinguishing helpful intuitive nudges from damaging intrusive thoughts. They can both feel immediate, insightful sometimes.
That's a really important distinction to learn. Intuitive thoughts are generally described as calm, peaceful, rational, present-focused, quiet, occasional, bringing understanding.
Feeling loving, supportive.
Yes, often loving, spontaneous, easy to let go of. Maybe bring sadness or disappointment, but without panic. They keep possibilities open, reflect our best self, solve problems, guide us to help others.
Okay.
They lead to understanding feelings, not assuming them. They feel rational, deep in the gut, and show us how to respond rather than demanding a reaction.
Whereas intrusive thoughts often feel hectic, anxiety-inducing, irrational, worst-case focused.
Exactly. Random, loud, persistent, panic-creating, rooted in fear, often triggered, leading to spirals.
Make you feel closed off, stuck.
Yes, reflecting our fearful self, creating problems, fostering me versus them, making assumptions about others' feelings, feeling irrational, stuck in your head with physical panic, demanding immediate reaction. It's a clear contrast when you lay it out.
Yeah, is really helpful. It highlights learning to discern the quality, the intention behind that inner voice. Is it calm guidance or frantic alarm?
Precisely.
Okay, finally, the material shifts to how we can actually start truly meeting our needs more effectively. It redefines self-care as fundamental, not just indulgence.
Not just bubble baths, yeah. It lists basic needs: security, nourishment, sleep, a clean environment, appropriate clothing, allowing feelings without judgment.
Simple but essential.
And the crucial point is taking personal responsibility for meeting these fundamental needs independently. That's the foundation for overcoming self-sabotage.
And when those basics are met, it ripples out positively.
Absolutely. Better sleep means more energy for exercise.
Right.
Physical comfort improves work focus. An organized home boosts well-being. Self-care enhances self-perception. It's all connected.
So the overarching conclusion is, understand and take responsibility for meeting your needs, but also let others help where you genuinely can't do it alone.
Yes.
And that's how we break the self-sabotage cycle and move towards a healthier, more fulfilling life.
Absolutely. Embracing that fundamental responsibility for our own well-being as adults.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you shared some incredibly insightful material. We've really dug into understanding how triggers and these negative emotions are actually invaluable guides.
Yeah, if we learn how to listen.
They offer crucial insights into our unmet needs, our underlying desires. If we can just learn to listen in this new way,
Yes, it's about shifting perspective, from seeing them as problems to overcome to recognizing them as important messages we need to interpret and understand.
Now, for you listening, something to take away and reflect on. Think about one specific negative emotion you experience fairly often.
Hmm.
Based on our discussion today, what might that emotion actually be trying to tell you about what you truly want or need in your life moving forward?
But that's a great question.
It's definitely a question worth sitting with and exploring.
A really powerful question for ongoing self-reflection and growth.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has offered you some valuable perspectives and insights.